How to make a night guard in your office. Now, a night guard is not a night guard is not a night guard. There are different types of night guards. In my opinion, the type of night guard that we want to give our patients are flat plane, hard acrylic, centric relation occlusion night guards. I only have the anterior teeth contacting on my night guards. Now, that'll sound peculiar to you if you're not familiar with the studies. Years ago, Williams and Lundquist did a study that showed if only the anterior teeth are contacting, like if you move your teeth, your lower jaw forward and touch only with your anterior teeth, 90% of the muscles of fibers of mastication do not fire. If all the teeth are contacting, 100% of the muscles of mastication fire, the master, medial pterygoid, temporalis. Why is that? When the posterior teeth are contacting, it's a signal to the brain, we are grinding food, so everybody get their hands on the oar and let's paddle. Whereas when only the anterior teeth contact, the brain says, this is very delicate. We're just incising something, so only a portion of these muscle fibers need to fire. Remember, at night when a patient is bruxing, you can't stop them from bruxing. We don't know a way to stop somebody from bruxing. But if only the anterior teeth are contacting, then less muscle fibers are firing, only about 10%, so they're putting less stress on the system. It's important that the patient not wear the night guard more than just when they're sleeping. If they wore it 24/7, the posterior teeth would super erupt because they're not contacting. The first thing we do is take a centric relation occlusion record at an open vertical dimension. And we do this by placing green stick compound in a water bath and set the water bath at 140 degrees. So you soften the green stick compound and then roll it up and place it between the anterior teeth. So you manipulate the patient's condyles into a maximally seated position in the fossa, centric relation, and then slowly close the patient into that compound between the anterior teeth until there's about 2 to 3 millimeters between the most posterior tooth in the mouth. And at that point, blow the compound with your air syringe and cool it and make it set. At that point, the compound is acting like a deprogrammer, and the muscles of the face you'll find miraculously just relax. You can almost take a thumb and a finger and just manipulate them, tapping them into that compound, and if they're in centric relation, the muscles of the face will just relax and that mandible will just be flaccid, just easily move it up and down because they're not having to brace. Then you're going to use Blue Moose, which is a fast-set polyvinyl siloxane, and squirt that between the posterior teeth. Then manipulate the patient's mandible back into the compound, which has a little indentation at the point of centric relation, and let that set up. So what you've done is taken a centric relation occlusion, occlusal registration record at an open dimension. Once we've taken the occlusal registration record, it's always very important that you cut back the record. And if you don't remove these wings and make it pretty flat, just where you have small indentations in the record, the bite will be open because the stone models won't seat completely into the occlusal registration record. Okay, this is Gorilla Glue and a paper clip, and this is Zap It Accelerator. So she places the paper clip like so, and then squirts the Gorilla Glue here and here, and then one squirt of that Zap It, and it makes the Gorilla Glue set up. Real easy way to mount these models. Then just mounting stone, pretty runny, and just tap that to place until it sets, and then come back and groom the model a bit, knock off the paper clips. Then she Vaseline the model and now is covering it with a thickness of tin foil. And there's the second thickness, and adapting that to the teeth. So normally we use 2 thicknesses of tin foil. Then you're going to Vaseline the lower teeth so they don't stick to the matrix for the splint. Now this is cold pack acrylic, just a monomer and polymer. You place the liquid first, very important, so you don't incorporate bubbles. And then you're going to just load with the powder and let that soak in. Don't mix it. Let it get firm, not set, but just where it loses its shininess. And you don't do a lot of movement until it just starts to get firm. But you never do mix it. Once you can handle it, then you're going to remove it from the cup with Vaseline on your gloves and roll it into a hot dog. So we're placing a horseshoe on the model with the aluminum foil. Now remember, this mounting is at an open vertical dimension, which is the perfect width of the night guard, or the occlusal orthotic appliance, which we'll talk about in forthcoming videos. And close it to place, and as soon as it starts to set, she's going to trim this, and I like to trim it to about where the gingival line is, which is going to be about the cemento-enamel junction. And she's adapted this well while it's setting to that model with the aluminum foil covering it, so it doesn't have a bunch of big spaces. Then mark the anterior contacts, because you don't want to cut them away. Then she's going to peel the aluminum foil from the night guard, and this is just a band removing the excess. Remember, this is not the final night guard. This is just the shell, and we're going to reline this shell in the mouth. And this is an arbor band, continuing to recontour, but we're not trying to make it perfect right here. This is just a shell that we're going to reline in the mouth. But when I place this in the mouth and I have the patient close into it before it's been relined, I want the anterior teeth to contact ideally. This is just a number 8 round burr on a straight shank, and I'm cutting little retention lugs or holes in the side of the acrylic shim for mechanical retention, because we're going to reline it with bisacrylate. Why don't I reline it with acrylic? Well, acrylic heats and shrinks when it sets up. Bisacrylate does not shrink and it doesn't heat when it sets up. So this works beautifully. Then I want to polish the front part so there aren't any edges on these contacts. I want this to be pretty flat. And then I don't want any contact, any occlusal contacts on the posterior part of the night guard. Your pencil marks or your red dots showing, but no lips on the contact. And come back and polish with this axis wheel. Now, this part right here, when I seat it in the mouth, I'll remove more of this area right here so the patient has more room for their tongue. Now this is the shell, trying it in the mouth. I don't want it to be tight at all. I want it to fit loosely. Now I checked it to be sure that when she closes together, she contacts on the anterior teeth. Then I'm going to blow everything out, be sure it's nice and clean, and load the shell with bisacrylate. This is Luxatemp. Luxatemp. Remember, we like that because it doesn't heat and it doesn't shrink. Keep the tip of the gun in the material so you don't incorporate air bubbles. Now we Vaseline the teeth. Be sure that you Vaseline especially any composite restorations on the teeth, or this will stick to it. You'll be able to remove it, but there may be a bit on that composite restoration, or if you've got provisionals, acrylic provisionals or bisacrylate provisionals, be sure to Vaseline them real well. I rarely place one of these when they're provisionals in the mouth. I wait until I've seated the final restorations. So we're going to push everything to place, push it to place, then close the patient into centric relation, and the occlusion is just on the cuspid teeth. No posterior teeth are contacting this splint. As soon as it reaches initial set, I'm going to use the back edge of a scaler and make a line between the excess bisacrylate and the shell so I can remove that excess. And then squirt that water in there as a lubricant and then finally remove it. Then we'll trim the excess, and I don't want this edge to be very thick. I'm going to use the arbor band for a while, and then I'll come back with an acrylic burr and thin this out so it's not but about 1 millimeter or so thick, because that bothers the patient's lip. Then I'm coming back with the acrylic burr and just thinning everything, smoothing everything. I want this line angle rounded. I'm going to remove excess here. There's only about 2-3 millimeters of palatal material on the shell. Then this is a smaller acrylic burr. I don't want tight contacts in the anterior part of the shim. I want pretty snug contacts in the posterior part, but it's uncomfortable to the patient because of the angle of the teeth if these teeth are real snug. I want them to make contact with the incisal edge and the incisal portion of these teeth indentations, so it's not tipping, but I don't want it tight on the teeth, and I want to remove the interproximal areas between the anterior teeth. The posterior teeth, I want it to click on, and that's not uncomfortable for a patient. So I've removed, just polished these with an acrylic burr, these posterior wings, and just so they're not projecting very far interproximally, but I've removed them between the anterior teeth because I want it to click on the posterior teeth but not feel tight on the anterior teeth. Now this is just pumice with a rag wheel, slow speed, clicks on. Check with articulating paper. So when I have the patient bite together, this articulating paper is about 1/1000th of an inch thick. I don't want to be able to pull it through when I place the articulating paper between the cuspids on the right and the left. So I'm having her tap together firmly and squeeze to be, and then with blue paper I'm having her grind her teeth right, left, forward, because I don't want any posterior contacts. See, this is ideal. There's no posterior contacts, and all the eccentric contacts, the blue marks, are on the anterior teeth, and the red dots are centric relation occlusion, and those are also just on the anterior teeth, no contacts on the posterior teeth. Now, this is very important. When the patient bites together, have her squeeze as hard as she can. That's the contact you want to be sure doesn't occur on the posterior teeth. If you can squeeze as hard as she can and make contact, remember that's what's going to happen when she's bruxing at night, because that's ungoverned clenching. So you click to place there on the posterior teeth, and just making those contacts really smooth with no ledges, just flat contacts. And I don't want to be able to pull, since only the cuspids are contacting, I don't want to be able to pull this thin articulating paper out from between the teeth. And then I'm going to manipulate the patient into centric relation and touch their teeth together very lightly and say, does it feel like you contact in the cuspid area at exactly the same time? And if they say, no, I can feel this one just a little bit more, I may take out a rubber wheel and just lightly dust it, and here's our final contacts. So what do they do with these once they have them? How do they take care of them? We give them a container to soak it in, and we have them soak it in mouthwash, a clear mouthwash. I like a peroxide-based mouthwash like Crest Whitening. And they place the night guards, I say sunny side up with the holes up, in that container of mouthwash during the day when they're not wearing it. Then at night they take it out, put it in a glass of water to get the mouthwash taste off, and then place the night guard on their nightstand. Go to bed, read, get ready to go to sleep, turn out the light, click it in. The next morning, hold it low over the sink and rinse it with their fingers with hot water to get any saliva off of it. Put it back in the container during the day when they're not wearing it or not sleeping. Change that solution every Sunday morning. And then I'll take a alcohol on a 2x2 or a cotton pad and wipe it out, wipe the container out just to be sure there's nothing growing in there. We also give them a small container that they use when they're on the road, when they're traveling. And when they are traveling with the night guard, be sure that they put a Kleenex or a cotton something in there that's damp so that the night guard does not dry out. If it dried out completely for a prolonged period of time, it might shrink.